to the Leap to L&D podcast, where we explore the dynamic world of learning and development through the journeys of industry leaders. I'm your host, Horvath, a learning strategist at Elai, and today we are thrilled to have Imrann Tanveer, head of talent and business growth at Beiersdorf Technologies, with us. With over 13 years of dynamic IT industry experience, he shares 6 years in software development with 12 years of overlapping training and people management. So hi, Imran. It's really lovely to hear you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. It's really nice to be here and sharing my experiences, my thoughts, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure we will have a lovely conversation, but just to sum up for all of our listeners, we'll talk today about what inspired you to make your career shift, how your technical background shapes the L&D approach, and what advice you have for those considering a similar path. Plus, we'll explore the critical interdependence of business development and L&D and how to measure the success and impact of learning initiatives. So without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, we've got a lot of topics to cover, but we always start with rapid fire questions. This is the same set of questions we ask every speaker of ours. So firstly, what book or resource can you recommend on L&D or educational topics?
Yeah, this has been a question that I've been asked many times, but I was always confused of this L&D to be specific, because it's all about people interaction, your leadership skills. So recently I came across a very handy starter guidebook. It's L&D Essentials, the Starter's Handbook, that was written by, obviously, you yourself, Ina. I highly recommend this because I keep on getting these queries every other day that people having, let's say, a decade-long experiences in education and training, and they keep on asking me that what would be those essentials, the topic, those fundamentals that we need to learn to get over those fundamentals to jump into this L&D domain as a full-time role. So I have already started using this book. I've gone through this, and I'll be promoting this for sure when anyone else now onwards asks me about this question. So a very handy one.
Thank you so much for this recommendation. It really means the world, especially coming from you, Imran. So next question is, who do you recommend to follow and invite to this podcast from L&D experts?
Yeah, for that, without any doubt, I would be naming Rob White, the person with whom I started my journey as an L&D expert back in 2018 as a full-time role. So he has been an amazing leader. By leader, I actually mean someone who knows what leadership is. Mm-hmm. So I've learned a lot from him. He's a great guy, a great leader, a great people manager, I would say. So I would love to have him on this show because his lessons, his experiences would be a lot more valuable, I guess.
Great, thank you for the recommendation. Moving on, could you share a memorable failure or a setback in your L&D journey, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, like when I started in 2018, there was like the situation or the playground that I got was quite challenging. I had to build up things from start, and there was a lot more to cover, scale up the engineering resources, automation of all the processes and all that. So the mistake that I did in the very start was I directly jumped on towards execution part, like executing the trainings, drafting the content, and then just rushing on towards execution part, having sessions every other day and all that. But after like a couple of days, or I guess a week or so, I realized that this is not something that should be the starting point. So I jumped back. I realized that there should be a proper planning for that. And from then I started working on the skill metrics. Skill metrics being a map of the skill set that everyone needs to mark their skill set before having all those trainings. And then we kept on planning all those trainings in context to that skill matrices. And then the planning and all those activities being done iteratively in aligning with the organizational values. So that actually turned off things very nicely. So we had previous results, then we were on towards execution, then we had the post analysis based upon the realistic data. So after that realization and stepping back and then planning all those processes, so that actually helped me a lot, and that's what I've been using whenever I have to do the scratch start of L&D or any learning and development programs anywhere. So that was a good learning lesson for me as well.
Yes, yes. I know that we will cover especially this topic a little bit later in more detail.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for that one. But moving on to the next question. If you were to hire an L&D specialist, what question would you ask for sure?
The question that I would be emphasizing more would be that obviously, like everyone, whatever I've heard over the years, that people love to jump on towards the execution parts. And when we do the need analysis, obviously everyone has a long list of which skill set that everyone wants to learn. So my question from that person would be, how would you be aligning the skill set in coordination with the organizational objectives? Like there is a skill set that is required by the organization, and there is a list of skill set that any particular resource wants to learn for their own wishes. So there needs to be a coordination between these two. And more importantly, I would be evaluating that person on the leadership skills as well, because I've become a huge fan of leadership skills. For whosoever wants to jump into this, he needs to learn, he needs to study the leadership skills a lot more deeper into the details. So these would be the two areas that I would mark them as fundamentals that need to be clear in any of the resources who plan to jump into this domain.
Brilliant. I love the approach to ask about the leadership skills as well. Even if you hire for L&D specialists, this is something that is crucial. Lastly, if you had to give just one piece of advice for someone who is starting their career in L&D, what would that be?
Yeah, for starting, I keep on getting this question being asked quite oftenly, that how you become so experienced in L&D, or how you manage to reach up to the leadership lead position or head of department position. So my answer is always that it's not about becoming the lead of any department. It's about learning the leadership skills. So I would be advising that don't don't rush towards getting the top position or getting those catchy titles along with your job roles. So understand, study, and I repeat, study in detail about the leadership skills. So once you are well equipped, fully understanding the leadership skills, that is the most ideal skill to have when you are forecasting yourself to be on top of that department or the skill set or that domain.
Moving on to the main topics of our podcast, large part of it is, of course, your journey from software engineer to the head of learning. So I am very interested in the fact that inspired and motivated you to transition from software engineer to the field of learning and development, because that's not a very common path, right, for people from L&D.
Yeah, you got it right. This is for sure the most asked question from me, that how and why from being a software engineer into this L&D or training domain. So it was like I've always been a huge fan of knowledge sharing. So throughout my career, even after graduating, so I've always been a person who, whenever learned anything, whenever I got any skill set, I learned any skill set, or went through any course, I've always been a person who loves teaching others, who love expressing myself or spreading around my learnings. So that habit started pulling me slightly and gradually towards this training and development domain. And then when I started initially, like while I was a software engineer, when I started training in all those technical areas, technical domains, So the feedback that I always used to got was a lot more encouraging. Like people used to say that we keep on hearing from many trainers, from many course organizers, but the way you teach, you always have a feeling about the audience. You have a feeling that obviously not all the listeners are equal. Everyone has a different capacity or different capability of understanding or absorbing the content or the trainings. So the way I used to teach, I used to get into the shoes of the listeners. So that were a couple of I guess differentiators that kept motivating me or kept honestly speaking, that kept dragging me towards this training and development domain. And then a couple of experiences like working with Android ATC and co-authoring like 4 books that were used in the training centers across the globe in 50 countries. So those things were actually a huge motivating factor for me. So that kept me motivating, and the continuous feedback that I kept getting from my audience were the motivating factors that kept me pulling up towards this training and development domain.
That's really interesting answer, and I totally relate to the point that you mentioned that I love teaching people, and I think that as long as you have this love to connect people and facilitate knowledge transfer, then you can transition to L&D from basically any field that you feel. So I'm very interested if you have any advice for those who experience the same path, for those professionals who would like to transition from tech background in general to L&D.
Yeah. So if you're planning to transition from the technical background towards L&D, you must have this attitude of spreading around your learnings. Because I have a strong belief that whenever you teach anything, whenever you spread around anything that you have learned, you always get more experiences, get more learning. Because if I am here to talk about any topic, could be technical, could be non-technical, but whenever I am speaking or training about any topic to the audience of like 10, 20, 50 people sitting and listening to me, the questions that I'll be getting from the audience would be the new things for me, the new mindset, asking those questions. So I might not have studied those topics in that context, in that regard. So it's always a new learning experience whenever you jump on towards an audience and express yourself and talk about your learning. So you always learn something new. So in the journey of this continuous new learning cycle, you keep on progressing and you keep on indulging into this. So that's something that you always should be welcoming wholeheartedly.
Sounds amazing. And well, transitioning is never easy to L&D field, especially because there is a vast amount of knowledge that you have to adopt before you can call yourself L&D professional. And even if you are the most amazing, let's say, software engineer or IT specialist in any regard, if you don't have a skill to transfer the knowledge the way you are understood, then you can't be an educator. So are there any resources that you can recommend to help gain this basic knowledge of how to facilitate knowledge transfer in the most ecological way, in the way that you will be remembered and understood?
Yeah. Talking about the resources, as I've mentioned already a couple of times, that in this L&D domain, in this training and development domain, leadership skills, your communication skills are the most important. A lot more important than all those technical skills, all those like tools and frameworks related knowledge. So about the leadership and communication skills, I would highly recommend. Like I have always been a huge fan of Simon Sinek. I followed him a lot. I've watched his videos. I've read a couple of books written by him. So he's always there with something so close to the real time scenarios that whenever I hear about him talking about, let's say, empathy, communication skills, listening skills, your skills to pass on effective feedback. So it's a lot more realistic based upon the real-time scenarios. And whenever I hear him, it feels like it's me facing those same scenarios, facing those same use cases every other day. So I greatly follow him. And then there's I might not call that very brief book directly into L&D, but there's a very brief book, Who Moved My Cheese. So it's only, I guess, 32 pages, quick handbook. So I would highly recommend everyone to go through this, because it's always a cycle of everyone continuously climbing up, competing with themselves. So, and always being adaptive of the new changes, the new technologies, the new things coming towards you. So welcome there, and don't wait for the opportunity to come to you. Instead, go and jump and grab the opportunity. So Who Moved My Cheese, then 1 Minute Manager, Start with a Why. These are a couple of books that I would recommend everyone to go through for sure.
Brilliant recommendations, and we haven't had any of them yet on our podcast, so it's really lovely to hear them from you, coming from you especially. And right now we are moving towards the direction of our conversation, where I will be asking questions from you, maybe like more of a head of learning. So as a head of learning, I'm really curious about your approach in measuring success and impact of L&D initiatives. So this is a topic which is very vast, and I'm sure that we can have a whole episodes of just devoted to this question. But if you could sum up in a nutshell.
Yeah, this is actually very important, because doing all those analysis, having all that statistical record is a lot more important to my year, whatever you have been working on. So in that regard, I would highly recommend to work on the skill metrics. What skill metrics, like the concept that I have been using throughout my career, is that before jumping on towards planning or executing any training program, any skill development program, you need to have a skill metrics in a way that it's basically a skills map of all the audience across all the skill set that you are targeting to teach to them. So once you have all that data in the statistical form, like resources, the skill set in the numeric form under each of those skill set, divided in all those core areas. So then you have a data before starting any training program. So that's one thing. Then you jump on towards planning and executing the training programs. And once that's done, you measure all those skill set again under the same matrices. So after that, you get a delta difference that, let's say, that person was at level this in under this skill set before the trainings, and now after the training he is at level this in that skill set. So this gives a good statistical view of what was the positive or the negative impact that you have created through your learning programs. Obviously, this might sound a bit vague if you are considering to measure all these data changes in a very short span of time, maybe in days or in a couple of weeks. So it does take time. Good things happen, but it does take time, but they do happen. It's very realistic way. And I have always been using this skill metrics. And yes, once you have all that statistical data, you can use the same statistical data, the same skill metrics for certain other purposes as well. Like for example, you have to align the resources for any new upcoming projects. You consider the same skill metrics that I want skill set, this specific skill set for that project. So I can easily filter out the resources according to this skill set being required in the new upcoming project. So you can also use that same data for hiring needs as well. That I have this human resource with me now. These are the new upcoming projects. So based upon the skill set that is being required by the new upcoming project, do I have the enough resources, or do I need to go and hire more? So that skill metrics can then be used for a lot more purposes and would be a lot more helpful in many ways. So that's the fundamental thing that I've always been using, and have become quite a big fan now of that.
Yes, it proves to be extremely impactful. I'm curious to find out your opinion because just like with skills-based learning, skills metrics do have some people who criticize in the way that they say that it's narrowing down to mathematical approach, a personality, and the evaluation of skills can become subjective, meaning that one manager thinks this is 4 and the other manager thinks that the skill is 5. How do you tackle this issue?
That's where the leadership skills jump in. So whenever there is a conflict of opinion, which is very natural, it happens every other case. So at that point, it is a lot more important about how you communicate, how you pass on the feedback, and how you empathetically emphasize or reach upon towards a common agreeing point. This has been happening. I've gone through this quite certain number of times. So I've been using this in a way that everyone, first of all, self-evaluates them, marks them under certain criteria. Obviously, I don't mean to be restricted to only these digits, these numbers only, because obviously, like the communication skills or the empathy or the leadership skills cannot be measured accurately under these numbers. But I'm talking generically about all the skill set. Could be technical, could be non-technical as well. So whenever there is a conflict, both the stakeholders sit together and discuss. I feel like, they discuss in a way that, in my opinion, you have this skill set at this level based upon the work that you have done or you have proven in this way. Obviously, the other person could have another way, but finding the common ground, passing on the feedback in an empathetic way, obviously helps a lot in reaching out a win-win situation or a common agreeing point, because it's never the end. Even if one quarter, even if on at one particular stage, if the skill set is falling under at any area or at any level, so there's always a room of improvement. So the motivation at that point, coming from the lead, coming from the senior, or coming from the fellow, the the motivation coming at that point would obviously be helping that person to prove him in the next upcoming quarter or next upcoming interval. So that's where the leadership skills come to rescue.
Yes, and I absolutely think that once these conversations happen, the organization itself grows because we learn to communicate better. That's the core of it. I'm interested if there are any other processes or frameworks that you would recommend that positively impact L&D.
Yeah, then there's another one I would call it the career ladder, because there has always been a confusion or a query in everyone's mindset. Wherever you are working, you always think of yourself progressing or climbing up to your profession in that same organization or in that same industry. So you always keep on asking yourself and your manager, maybe, or your lead, that what is my career growth ahead after, like, let's say 6 months, year, 2 year, or 5 years. So at that point, making it clear, making the expectations clear for yourself and for them is a lot more helpful and a lot more important. So for that, I would recommend a process, whatever you name it, it can be named as a career ladder. So there should be specifically defined, clearly and openly defined objectives or the criteria that need to be achieved for climbing up to the next level, for climbing up towards your promotions. So that is another thing that has helped us quite a few times, that whenever anyone asks that after 6 months, would I be promoted to the next level, or when would I be promoted to the next level? So what's my career growth, or what's my career plan? So the planning should be there. So tomorrow, if anyone comes to you and asks any question, so this is where all the data lies, and that data should be transparent, open with everyone. So there, if that transparency is there, so then there doesn't like this doesn't leave any ambiguity of why, when, and how would any resource be promoted or progress to the higher levels of the department or that domain. So that process or that framework also helps us a lot in keeping the motivation level, the growth level, the learning level, everything transparent and aligned with everyone on the same patterns.
So transparency is the key here.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of transparency.
Absolutely.
It solves many problems already.
Absolutely, yes, and I love that it's coming from L&D. That this is what we are supposed to become, right? Next question is again, as a head of learning, is there approach that you take to design training programs that cater specifically to business development needs? So connecting training program and showing direct business impact. So is there anything that you could share, of course, with without mentioning names maybe, but
yeah, I can call that there's quite a close connection between business development and training and development. Why? Business development is about attracting or bringing in the more business, bringing in the more clients, the more projects. But even if even as a head of organization, even if you are getting a lot more revenue, more leads, more businesses, but your workforce should have the skill set to fulfill those or to work on those or successfully deliver those projects as well. So there's quite a close coordination needed for those. So in order to design such programs, I would first of all analyze any organization's primary domain, their primary audience, their target audience, their services, and the regions. There are many factors. So whenever I have all that data with me, then I'll be jumping on towards planning about from where to start, which regions, which skill set, which domains, which tools to be used in order to train the resources according to fulfilling those business development needs. So all those factors would equally be contributing in planning that part.
sounds extremely interesting. And again, I have a feeling that I would ask 20 questions more as a follow-up, because I'm sure that there is so much that you can share from your practice. However, I'd like to sum up with one final question. We've covered topic of resources twice this conversation. However, now I would like to approach it from a different perspective. You've reviewed and co-written multiple books. And right now we have more content than ever before. How do you define the value of resource for L&D professional? Because I can go to LinkedIn, type in L&D, and there will be hundreds of thousands resources that I can check. So if I'm just starting career, this can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah, very important question. And I would like to clear a confusion in this very regard that talking about the content development or the authoring of books, there's a difference according to the domains. Like for instance, if I talk about the technical content or the technical books, I would not much highly recommend going through that books on the technical side. Why? Because now with the passage of time, the technology is evolving so rapidly that you cannot only rely on reading those technical content related books. Because a book takes a couple of months from the date of being started, written, then reviewed, and then published, and then getting to the into your hands. So on the technical side, I won't be rating a lot higher towards going through that textual content written or published in the form of books. Although I have been co-author of a few books in the past, but since having passed through that cycle, I can now I can now understand the time that it takes from start to end. But talking about the non-technical domain, about the communication skills, about the leadership skills, in that regard, I can recommend, yes, the books are important because the communication skills, the leadership skills, the art of giving feedback, the art of listening, the art of answering, conflict resolution, people management, empathy, all those things, if we get in a shape of some good, well-written, comprehensive books, like a couple of the ones that I've mentioned from Simon Sinek, they are a lot more important and they are very helpful because these things don't change that rapidly and don't change altogether within few months. So the difference lies between the domain that you are targeting. So so just to summarize, on the tech side, don't rely yourself 100% on the textual books, but on the communication, training, leadership, communication skills side, yes, books are a very good handy resources to go through it. But again, in the digital media, we have all that content in the visual form as well, on in the videos form as well. So that's always a shortcut to go through that.
Yes, absolutely. It's really great and valuable piece of advice. I once had a conversation with a marketing specialist, and he mentioned that he completed his education 15, 20 years ago, back when we didn't have YouTube and Instagram and all the other promotional websites that we use now. So actually his education is not that important these days. So it's very important to understand what knowledge are you seeking for and how fast it changed. And I love that about your answer, Imran. That's a wrap for today's episode of Leap to L&D. A big thank you to Imrann Tanveer for sharing your insights and experiences with us. Also, big shout out to our partners at Elai, the AI-powered platform transforming how we create and share the content in the world of L&D. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Stay tuned for more conversations with leaders who are shaping the future of L&D. Until the next time.